Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I want to just take this opportunity to say good morning and how honored I am to be with you today. I also want to take this opportunity to thank David and John and others responsible for my being here, and to Dr. Colt and to Dr. Gill. Am I correct? Colt Gill, and to Carmen and others doing the outstanding work that you're doing. I just want to applaud you. In fact, as I was listening, I got fired up. I got motivated. Like, Oregon, you all are doing the work, and so I just want to say that the work is long. It could be arduous. For sure, but stay in the fight. We need you to stay in the fight. And the same thing is true for all of the outstanding educators out there listening to me. I just want to take this opportunity. Some of what I will say will be critical. Some of what I will say will challenge you a bit, but I just wanted to thank you on behalf of all the teacher educators, all of the parents, all of the community members for pushing and going above and beyond in the support of our young people. You are in so many ways the real heroes and sheroes of the work. And so thank you, thank you, thank you for all you're doing in the midst of a pandemic. In the midst of a pandemic, I thank you. I thank you. And so, because I'm gonna be very clear, David, I need my entire hour, so I will be speaking for an hour. But if there are things that I rush through a bit, I do recognize and I do want to respect the time. I will be sharing these slides later, so if you like the slides, you will have an opportunity to look more deeply at them. I just want to start by saying what I share here is really for your professional development. You make your own decisions in moving forward. So just a disclaimer there. I also want to ask that you tweet twice. I want us to blow Twitter up, Oregon, or wherever you are. Right. I want you to tweet and make sure you tag me in the tweet. I hope something is said today that impacts you, and that it impacts you in the way that you are able to push forward and do your work more efficaciously, to do your work more in a more transformative way as we work with young people, So your task today, I'm going to do most of the work, but your main task is to make sure you find two questions, you find two points that resonate with you, and tweet it out into the world so that other people might benefit. So I want to jump right in, and I want to start with race and racism. What is it about this notion of racism that can make it hard? Imperative one is that we must address, as Colt has already shared with you, that we must address all forms of racism in this work as we move to places of equity, and as we move to places where we support all our young folks, but especially our minoritized communities. When I talk about race, I want to be clear that I'm not only talking about skin color. So I want you to deepen, if you will, the ways in which you think about this notion of race. Race is about so much more than skin color. It is, of course, socially constructed, legally constructed in the US. It is historically constructed. It's physically, that is, via phenotype, but not biologically constructed, and is contextually constructed. So make sure if you say skin color, say skin colors if that's what you mean. But if you say race, you're really talking about something much more complex. When I mention racism, I want to be clear that we're talking about power, and what sometimes happens is we believe that if we're not consciously or intentionally doing something to contribute to racist systems and racist institutions and so forth, then we're not on the hook for dismantling it. And I want to just say that often racism shows up unintentionally, right? It shows up in the practices, in our belief systems, and what we do. And so I think it's imperative that we not only talk about racism and the role of racism and discrimination in the abstraction. What do you mean, Rich Milner? What I mean is individuals make systems. Come on, y'all. I hope you're out there. So each of you has an opportunity, right? To build and to contribute to attempting to dismantle racist policies, racist practices, and the like. And we need you to take and to grab hold of your own beliefs, your own ideologies, your own mindsets, right? That influences, and that those pieces that influence what happens through policies, institutions, and systems. So moving away from only talking about racism through policy or through the abstraction, I think is important. The other part I want to make here is that, I realize that some are going to say that this is really not about, or why are we focusing on race and why are we focusing on racism. One teacher shared with me, she said, our principal invited you here to talk to us about specific strategies to teach our poor children. I was devouring what you had to say until you got to this race stuff. Race has nothing to do with how I teach my kids living in poverty. What does it matter, really? And for the remainder of the professional development session, she doodled. And I just want to say that that mindset, right, can really be dangerous in our fight to try to get better, to try to be our best with the folks with whom we're working. And so I want to stop here for just a moment. And I want to ask you, like, what is it? I've posed this question since 2001, right? And I have a repository of data. But just the responses, that I've learned over time. Well, what is it? Why is it so hard for us to have conversations about race, especially in mixed company? I'm going to give you a moment. I want to see some of your responses in the chat. Why is it so hard to have conversations about race in mixed company? The chat's done. Afraid. What if I use the wrong word? I hear you. What else? Why else is it so hard? Lack of trust. Yes. What else? Why is it so hard for us to engage the R word in mixed company? Yes. So I was in mixed. Yes. Fear for hurting someone. Yeah. Being misunderstood. What if I miss? You all better. I hear you out there. What else? Yes. Because many people don't understand it. Yes. It's extremely hard for people to be vulnerable. Vulnerable. Yes. Yes. What else? Why else is it so hard for us to engage? And I see it. Yes. Being framed as his threat to bring, absolutely. What I've come to understand, I've done this work and keep sending them. I've done this work, David, for many, many years. And I can tell you that the districts that make the most progress, or the districts that really work to dismantle racist, white supremacist systems, are those that engage race in a serious way. I just want to be very clear about that. So the engagement of race has to be central to the work of justice, central to the work of equity. And by the way, we're not only talking about our minoritized young folks, we're talking about our white students as well. White is a race as well, right? So I just want to make that clear. But why race? Why race? We know that there's an overrepresentation of students of color in special education. Why race? We know that there's an underrepresentation of students of color in gifted education. If you look at the work of Donald Ford and others, you look at the work of Alfredo ORTIi, he talks about this, the overrepresentation of students of color. And Shante Singers, he talks about the underrepresentation of students of color in special education. Alfredo ORTIi talks about the overrepresentation of students of color in special education. We know that there's an over-referral of Black students to the office. We know that there's an overwhelming number of Black and brown students who are expelled and suspended, right? Why race? We know that young people and adults, right, are still experiencing what has been conceptualized as microaggressions, and that what some of us are now calling macroaggressions, right, that have a real bearing on the psychological health of people inside and outside of learning environments. And just drawing here from Darrell Sue, we know that the microaggressions are brief and commonplace daily verbal and behavioral or environmental indignities, whether intentional or not. And I want you to underline that when you get the slides. I want you to highlight whether intentional or not, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial slights and insults towards people of color. Why race? Why race? Because young people, and especially minoritized bodies, are still being told they are failing their classes. Why are young people being told they're failing their classes in the midst of a pandemic? Right? In the midst of a pandemic, we've got to move beyond, and we've got to rethink, we've got to reimagine, right? This notion that young people are failing. What if we put a moratorium on grading, right? That's what I'm pushing here. What if we put a moratorium on grades, not grading, right? So in other words, what if we provided more formative feedback for young people to be able to help them get better and move outside of this notion that they're failing? Each of us is in a place where we are struggling to make it through a pandemic. And so we have to reimagine, and we have to think about and disrupt the very practices that we have become so comfortable in advancing. We're in the midst of a pandemic. No young person should be told that he, she, they are failing. In addition, Black students are still having the police called on them, even in their homes. Why race? Because we know that Black and brown students are still being referred to the office for being late to Zoom, right? When, we can talk a lot about why that might be the case, or for not turning on their cameras in the midst of challenging situations, or being argumentative to teachers. This is why race. This is why race. Why race? This is why. Why race? This is why. Imperative 2 is that we've got to center identity, and we've got to think about identity and justice as interconnected. Now, when I talk about identity centered, we're going to focus in on two essential areas here. One is about what I call curriculum convergence, and we get at addressing challenging behavior. We get at thinking about disruption. We get at all of the things that we care about in this work by really engaging young people in good teaching, engaging young people in outstanding and transformative curriculum, right? And providing assessment mechanisms that actually match and align with the humanity of young people. So it is not so much of our worrying about trying to control the bodies of young people or trying to control the minds of young people. It is how we co-create the ethos, co-create an environment such that young people are able to build agency, able to feel empowered, right? To be and do and engage and fall in love with learning. And the second piece of the framework that I want to spend some time talking about is what's known as really thinking about psychological and mental health as curriculum, psychological and mental health as curriculum. Are y'all still out? I hope you all are still out there with me. And so when I talk about curriculum convergence, I'm talking about really thinking about the who, that is the identity spaces of the young people with whom we're working, the what, that is what we're supposed to be teaching and engaging, and the where, that is how we connect the identity spaces, the curriculum, and also thinking about the broader societal or community perspectives. And there are three ways that I want to help us frame what I mean when I say curriculum. When I talk about curriculum, I mean what students have the opportunity to learn. So the curriculum is not only what shows up in the graded course of study. A curriculum is what students have the opportunity to learn and what they experience on the walls in the schools, right? When they walk into the district office, what are the curricular lessons? Who's represented on the walls of the district office? Who's represented on the class, and when they walk into the school, right? What do they experience? Do they walk in through metal detectors, right? So what students have the opportunity to learn is what I want us to think about regarding the curriculum. Students experience a curriculum as they walk to and from school. So the curriculum is dynamic, it's constantly evolving, and it is certainly designed and can be designed in ways that can make a major difference in the lives of the people with whom you are working. And so I want to draw here from Elliot Eisner. And Eisner says that there are three ways to think about the curriculum that are important. The first way is the curriculum that is explicit, right? So we teach a curriculum that we know we're teaching. That curriculum is normally written down, right? So It's an explicit curriculum that we draw from the standards that really manifests and shows up and can be engaged, and we know we're experiencing it in an overt way. We also experience what's known as, students also experience what's known as an implicit curriculum. And the implicit curriculum is the curriculum that we teach, but it's a curriculum that we don't write down. Sometimes the implicit curriculum is intentional, right? Other times the implicit curriculum is unintentional, right? It's not we're not conscious of that type of curriculum, right? So an example of an implicit curriculum that's unintentional, or an implicit curricular practice that's unintentional is, I was actually in a classroom, and the principal came over the intercom and asked the teacher to send 3 strong boys to the office to carry some books back to her classroom, right? That is certainly, well, there was certainly a lesson embedded in that, but that was not an explicit, or it was not an intentional lesson, right? So why not just send 3 students to the office to carry the books back to the classroom? I hope that makes sense, right? And we also teach, and this is the most fascinating form of the curriculum, we teach what's known as the Null Curriculum, the Null Curriculum. And the Null Curriculum, colleagues, is the curriculum that we teach, and it's a curriculum that we don't even necessarily, it's a curriculum that we teach based on what we don't expose students to. So in other words, students learn something based on what they don't have access to, or what we don't push in the classroom or through learning experiences. Let me give you an example. For instance, I was in an early childhood classroom, and I was observing the space. And on one day, a parent walked in, and the parent was wearing a red sweater, and a student walked up, and the student looked to be about 3 or 4 years old. The student walked up and said, "Oh, you have on a red coat." And the teacher said, "That's right. That's right. And yesterday we talked about the letter R, and you just used the letter R when you mentioned the color red, right?" And I thought, wow, what an engaging way to interact with this young student, right? In the very same classroom, some students walked in, and on this day, a few days later, some parents walked in, and in this very same classroom, a student walked up and said, "Oh, you have 2 mommies. I have a mommy and a daddy." And the teacher said, no, go back to your center and play, right? So there was a learning opportunity embedded in that avoidance, right? Embedded in that avoidance, albeit unintentional. So students are constantly learning and building tools and perspectives around what is and what is not salient and important related to their identity spaces. You get it? The who? You get it? Hopefully you get it. All right. I also want to make it clear here that what we realize is that when we think about a school to prison pipeline, that Black people represent almost 13.4%, or approximately 13.4%, but they represent 37.5% of the general prison population. I want you to keep that in mind as we move forward as a curricular space, as an opportunity for us to think, Now, this summer, I have twin daughters, and I'll talk a little bit more about them as time goes on. But we read 3 books, right? And well, we read several books, but 3 of the books that I want to talk with you about are these books here. One is called From the Desk of Zoe Washington, And this is a powerful book. My daughters are 10 years old. And this is a powerful book because it's about a young Black girl, Zoe, whose biological father has been incarcerated. All right, I hope you all are following me. So Zoe finds out that her father has been writing to her. She's never met her father. She learns that her father has been writing to her, but her mother has been keeping the letters from her, right? So Zoe lives with her mother and her stepfather, and Zoe's stepfather is white. So they have a wonderful, they have a wonderful family, she has a wonderful relationship with her father, but she yearns for this relationship with her biological father, right? This provides an outstanding text for my daughter, right? Because the book, what it does is, and I'm drawing here the mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors from Rudine Sims Bishop. This provides a great mirror for my daughter because one of them is, she loves to write. Imagine Zoe and imagine Rich Milner's daughter, one of them, right? This gives her an opportunity to reflect on herself, right? It also gives her an opportunity to look out and to think about the broader carceral system, right? Going back here. You get where I'm going here? So it allows her to think about and to provide a window into somebody else's experience as well, right? And so the sliding glass doors piece really is a metaphor related to her capacity to walk inside the experiences of other people and to start to build empathy and the like. But it also, and don't miss this, is a powerful space of engagement, right? Our curriculum has to engage and grab hold and almost kidnap, right, young people into spaces where they fall in love with learning. We also read a book called Front Desk, and Front Desk is a powerful book about a family, a young girl, Mia, whose family has immigrated to the U.S. from China, and her family has experienced deep levels of poverty. They're grappling with this question of meritocracy, right? So what does it mean to, they have bought into, or they had bought into this notion of the American dream when they moved here, but when they moved to the city, they start to realize and recognize how there are so many systems working against them related to language oppression and the like. This book gave my daughter and me, it gave us a powerful opportunity to think about language oppression, to think about immigration status, right? To think about how a resource challenges and so forth. And it also gave my daughter an opportunity to think about, and don't miss this, think about her own privileges, even in the midst of her thinking about how issues of oppression show up and manifest. So my daughter has some economic levels of privilege, right? So it gave us an opportunity to really think deeply about that. I hope you all are still with me. We also read a book called Rules, and Rules is about a young girl, Catherine, whose brother has autism, right? And Catherine, just sort of one of the major themes of the book is Catherine just really wants to be, and who really just wants to feel and be quote unquote normal, right? She does not. She hates the fact that people spend time. Teasing her brother, but she takes good care of her brother, and she's always there to defend him. It gave my daughter and me an outstanding opportunity to empathize with and work to understand how some people in society and some people in the world experience and come to know difference, right? Come to know difference. And so I want to use this as an anchor as we move forward, and as we think about a metaphor, if you will, as we think about this notion of engaging and helping students see themselves, their identity space, and to really come to deeply understand that, y'all, don't miss this. Our lives, our humanity are deeply connected, and we've got to do this work early so that learning opportunities are more, and they become more than just what shows up in, or what we believe to be salient for them to learn. It has to be deeply connected to who the students are, with whom you're working, as it relates to what's happening in the broader society. So I'm gonna play this clip here, and I want you to think about two things here. I want you to think about, how would you respond to this young person were he in your family and or were he in your school or classroom? How would you respond to this young person?
All right, this is a crazy video I want you to see. It's very simple, but it means a lot. A 10-year-old boy who's black in Connecticut was hiding from a police car, and it demonstrates in this really simple way that kids are paying attention to what's going on. So let me tell you the story. In the video, you see the kid spot the police car, okay? He's not in school because it's coronavirus. He pauses his game of basketball to hide behind this car, the cop car. The child's father says when he asked his son why he hid, the child replied, because they killed George Floyd.
I want you to take a moment, and had we more time, we would delve into this more deeply, but I just want you to take a little bit of time and think about the implicit and the null curriculum. And what tends to happen in school is experiences like this, even if we're told as educators, as the teacher, right, that that this experience has happened with this young student. We go on about our business and we teach, quote unquote, a real curriculum. I want to suggest that going on and not addressing this reality, right, actually is a lesson that students learn through the null. So take a moment, and I want you to reflect in the chat just for a moment. What are your reactions to this clip? Is the chat open?
Yes, the chat is open, and people just need to make sure that if they want everyone to see their answers, they change from all panelists to all panelists and attendees.
Yes, I see one. Other reactions? She said, kids see and hear, yes, absolutely. Breaks my heart, right? Okay. Fear for children, yes. What else? Frustrating for the reality of what it is. Absolutely. Shocked and sad, even though I shouldn't be shocked. I said, okay. SROs, yeah, okay, great point. Keep sending them. Learn behavior, but not taught. Yeah. How do we change this? I hear you, Lisa. Yes. Two more here. Other comments here. This fear over and over again. Yes. Oh, I see some people are really reflecting. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Now they're coming. Now they're coming. No one should experience this kind of fear.
All right. This is a.
Okay. So I want to suggest here that what some of our young people are grappling with is what's known as vicarious trauma, right? And what we know from good research is that when traumatic experience, when mental health challenges are not addressed, they tend to show up in their interactions in the classroom. They tend to, and young people may not have the language to express, or may not be able to express it in the way that those of us who are older might be able to express it, right? But we've got to be mindful that young people are grappling with and working through this notion of vicarious trauma. And I'm trying to move to the health sciences here in this notion of vicarious trauma. And some people refer to this as secondary trauma, but I'm trying to conceptualize and push this notion that even if I have not experienced on a personal level, right, whatever the traumatic experience is, if my identity space is connected to someone who has experienced that traumatic experience, I take on I may take on those traumatic experiences vicariously. What do you mean, Rich? When this young person hides behind a car because the young person sees himself connected to the bodies of to the body of George Floyd, as he mentioned, then that is something that in schools we've got to be mindful of. And we have to develop the tools to be responsive. And we're going to talk some about what those tools might look like. We also, when we think about what else shows up in the null, I did not know about, I had not learned about Juneteenth. I read about it later in life, but that's not what was taught in school. We didn't learn about Black Wall Street, right? We didn't, when the Pulse shooting occurred in Orlando, Florida, most of what happened in Orlando or in our classrooms was that those young people came back into schools and we went on about school as usual. So the Pulse shooting was seen as a null curriculum site. I hope you all are with me. So in other words, if my identity space is connected to those bodies that were shot in that nightclub, right, then it means that I might be experiencing a form of vicarious trauma. We're going to talk a little bit, later about this notion of psychological and mental health. But, sometimes we wonder why young people are angry, or we wonder why they are upset. And we tend to sort of rationalize, and we tend to develop conjectures that connect to, this notion that they are, just going through adolescent development, right? And that is likely true. We have good science in developmental science, right? We know we have great empirical studies in developmental science. But what I'm coming to understand is that young people are also angry sometimes, or they're also sad because they're working through homophobic, xenophobic, racist, sexist, discriminatory spaces, and they're trying to understand how to navigate and negotiate that space, right? And so it's our job to co-create an ethos. So you all with me? Co-create a space so that young people are able to understand the convergence of their identity spaces and what they have an opportunity to learn. If you look at these data show you the suicide rates, right, of young people who are often placed or people who are often placed on the margins. If you look at our trans community, for instance, you see the alarming rates of attempted suicide among them. So this, colleagues, is not just a matter of my sharing here. In some ways, this can really be our capacity to build spaces of healing and spaces that can save people's lives. And I know we can and we must do it. When I lived in Pittsburgh, quite often what I found was the synagogue shooting. What it demonstrated was, people provided, they shepherded young people into to school counselors and to social workers. But my point is, we have got to build the tools and the capacity to, first of all, realize when young people are grappling with vicarious trauma. Are y'all with me? I hope you're with me. And we also must develop mechanisms to support them when they have gone through an experience. And I also want to suggest here, when we think about vicarious trauma, we have to understand that the teaching through the null, that is the avoidance of conversations about the murders of these bodies, and the avoidance and lessons through the null, when we think about the murders of these bodies, send a particular kind of message about what and who are important. My father drove a forklift at General Motors for 38, 39 years, right? And he is not much of a phone talker, but I'll never forget the day he called me. I was in the midst of teaching. He called me and I stepped out of class. I said, hey, hey, Dad, what's going on? And he started mid-sentence. He said, if you ever get pulled over by the cops, you do exactly as you're told. Don't ask any questions, and I've been with my white friends, out and about, and a police officer or someone, would approach us and they would pose questions, right? I don't have that. If I want to keep my life, it's a very different way of interacting with law enforcement. And let me be clear here. Like, for me, it's not an issue of blue lives versus black lives. Right? It is a matter of how can all lives matter when black lives don't, right? And so we've got to be mindful that the way these systems are set up perpetuate a particular kind of way, and that young people are grappling with it, trying to make sense of. I was in Rockwood, Missouri, I'll never forget, and I was driving down, I got in a loaner car. And I was driving down I'd flown into St. Louis and I got a loaner car, and I was driving to my professional development session, and I saw blue lights. And so I pulled over. And when I pulled over, I was looking for the registration. I don't know about you all, but I can never, find that registration, but I was looking for the registration, and the blue lights passed me by. And when the blue lights passed me by, I started back on the freeway to my professional development session, and I broke down and I started crying. And I was trying to understand, like, Rich, why are you crying? You didn't get a ticket. And what I realized now in my reflection is that I was experiencing and grappling with vicarious trauma. Nobody knows that I have 3 letters behind my name. Nobody knows or cares, right? That I work at a university and have children and you know, and try to be a great person and good person and all those kinds of things, right? In my mind, I realize I am a black body, right? That could show up and manifest like this. Again, if we don't understand, if we continue teaching what happens in society, right, through the Null Curriculum, we start to understand, we can start to understand why we likely will continue seeing young people demonstrating the trauma, demonstrating the challenges, the psychological strain they're experiencing inside the classroom. I know I'm right about it. So my mood was deeply influenced by the fact that that I thought I was getting ready to be pulled over. It is not something, and I'm a full adult, you know, it is not something that I was able to bounce back from as quickly as some other people may be able to. And so when you think about young people, we're talking about babies, and I don't care how tall they are, right? How big they are, right? If they're 18 and younger, they're our children, right? They're our babies, right? And so when we think about taking good care of them, right? Making sure we create spaces where they're taken care of, we have to understand curriculum convergence. And here are some other examples of what curriculum convergence looks like. Are y'all still out there? I wish somebody could wave at me or something in the chat. I hope people are with me. I hope people are with me. And so we also see here, you know, we can talk about everything from immigration, you know, when those babies were caged at the border, to the Flint, Michigan water crisis. Again, you don't see these as, and my point is not that they should be seen as spaces of separatism as much as it is about building criticality, because young people are experiencing and coming to know and understand what's happening in society, and then they walk inside schools and they say, those people must not care about me, right? They say those teachers must not know what's going on in the world, because my community, people I care about, folks who look like me, folks who've taken care of me, are struggling in these spaces. So when we talk about how do we meet the needs of, and how do we work to build inclusive spaces, and how do we decrease challenging behavior, how do you know, the answer is we build powerful curriculum. We don't build it, we co-create powerful curriculum convergence such that young people show up, and they want to show up because they understand that the exercise is not only connected to a grade, it's connected to something else. And we'll talk about that a bit more as time goes on. So I'm going to move a little bit faster here. The imperative 3 is really about the curriculum, We must push the highest form of the curriculum in the work we do. And I want to make it clear here that the highest form of the curriculum is what's known as social action. And I'm drawing here from the work of Jim Banks and other curriculum theorists and multicultural education experts. The lowest level of how we do this work is what shows up when we focus on a hero or a holiday. So we're going to talk about Sonia Chavez, or we're going to talk about Sonia Sotomayor, or we're going to celebrate Latinx Week, or we're going to talk about Marcus Garvey, or we're going to talk about Oprah Winfrey, or whoever the hero or the shiro or the person is. So that's the lowest. As we talk about contributions, right? That's the lowest level. There's a second level of curriculum transformation. I hope y'all are still with me. And it's called the additive approach. And this is the approach where we look at content and concepts and themes and perspectives that are added to the curriculum, right? Where we might even go from a single person, and we might say, we're going to give it a whole week, right? We're going to give it an entire, February is Black History Month, right? So we're going to add to the Eurocentric, white-centered curriculum, right? And we're going to give it a whole month, right? That is not transformative work, which are the highest two levels. So in other words, we have to be conscious of transforming the curriculum to a degree such that young people understand that this is not some special added piece, right? The curriculum is, we all contribute to the very fabric of what we experience in the US, right? Or what we experience in the world, right? And so decolonizing the curriculum is what is essential. And that work of decolonization shows up and it manifests to what we see as social action, which is the highest form. Let me be clear here that, when I first started my work as a teacher educator in 2001, I remember spending my first 4 or 5 sessions just trying to make the case for equity in my classes, right? Really just trying to help my students understand that, our students now are showing up ready to go. I'm telling you, they understand. I don't have to spend 5 sessions anymore trying to make the case. Young people, and I think in a very similar way, when you look at the protests and the movements, and you look at those bodies in those spaces, it demonstrates a level of connectedness and a level of transformation unlike anything we have seen in the past, If we look at these bodies, right? Young people are not sitting back as passive participants about it. If you look at these bodies, the highest form of curriculum, y'all, is social action. You look at these bodies, and you look at these bodies. Look at who's in those spaces, sacrificing, pushing, right? The highest form of curriculum, Now, I wanted to, there's another example that I wanted to give. I want us to engage, but I'm scared we're not going to have time. So I may go back to it. There's a great example that I wanted to share with you about a robbery, but if we have time, I'll come back. All right. If we have time, I'll come back to it. All right. So the fourth imperative is really around how we language the work for justice and equity, how we language the word. And again, the way we language, that is what we say, what comes out of our mouth, right, plays a major role, a significant role in the kinds of relationships we build with young people, with the message that we're sending to them and the like. And what we don't say, don't miss this, shows up in a very powerful way, or can show up in a very powerful way. Insofar as what students don't experience can actually show up in terms of, or it can actually manifest in a way that sends a particular kind of message about how you feel about them, your connections with them, and the like. So let's look at some how we might reimagine language, rather than saying that we have an achievement gap. I really want to push and encourage us to use new language, to think about new lenses in talking about. So, I'm arguing here that we actually don't have an achievement gap. What we really have is we have a caring gap, and we have a grace gap, and we have a vulnerability gap. And I hope somebody is vulnerable and understands that. I'm yearning for educators to be vulnerable in this space as we work to humanize the experiences of people, not only students, but communities, right? We don't have an achievement gap, but what we have is an access gap, and we have a school counseling gap, and we have an assessment gap. And we don't have an achievement gap, but what we have is we have a psychological services gap, and we have a funding and resource gap, and we don't have an achievement gap. I know I'm talking, but we also, what we really have is an early childhood education gap, and we have a geography of opportunity gap, and we don't have an achievement gap, but what we really have is a higher ed gap, and we have a community school connections gap, and we don't have an achievement gap, but what we really have is we have an empathy gap, and we have a pop culture and hip hop gap, and we have a research gap. And what I have attempted to advance is this idea of an opportunity gap. If we change the way we talk about our experiences, it shapes and it influences. There's a dialogic, right? A relationship between what we say, what we believe, what we think, and what we ultimately do. I hope when I return, if I ever return to Oregon, if I ever return to this space, that we're not talking about achievement gaps, but we're in fact naming and perhaps calling them gaps in opportunities. If you believe that Black Lives Matter, then we should be saying that, right? Other problematic language, and I know it's challenging, but we've got to stop calling our students tier 1. We got to stop calling them tier 2. We got to stop calling them tier 3. And when we do that languaging, right, we act like sometimes that young people don't know what it is that we are saying or what it means. They don't. It's just like when they, you know, those reading groups, we used to have those reading groups, and the Eagles, you know, were the high group, and the Pirates were the low group or whatever, right? That kind of languaging shows up, and I challenge you colleagues to reimagine how we language, because there's power in how we talk about and how we talk to our students. Imperative 5 is really about building motivation and engagement with young people. And how do we do that? This work in disrupting inequity, in addressing uh, racism, and addressing sexism, and addressing other forms of marginalization really is deeply tied to our capacity to build with and our capacity to build relationships. And self-efficacy shows up, and self-efficacy has to do with students' beliefs about their capacity to do a task, And there are 4 ways that, according to the theory, that we build this motivation, or we build this confidence in young people to do a task. The first way is what's known as verbal persuasion. What do you mean, Rich? It's how you talk to students, right? That can make a powerful difference, right? So when you're talking to students and you're trying to help them understand that you believe in them and that they can do it, right? The way you engage them is going to be important. Now, if they don't have a relationship with you, you can talk all day long and they aren't going to believe you. But if you're establishing and you're building a powerful relationship, then you have a better chance of those young people believing that you know they can be successful, right? So that verbal persuasion is important. The second form is what's known as the vicarious experience. Right? So rather than pushing out, or rather than saying that you're not concerned about the other people in the class, really focusing in and helping students understand that they have the capacity to succeed just as other people have succeeded in the domain, right? So, for instance, if growing up, I had never read about an astronaut. So my reading about and learning about Mae Jemison was transformative, right? Right? It was transformative. It moved me into a place where I believed I could become an astronaut, right? In a very similar way, my colleague, one of my professors at The Ohio State University, Tyrone Howard, when I saw Tyrone Howard as a professor, right, it influenced, excuse me, it influenced my belief about my capacity to become a professor. So those vicarious experiences are really important. And so as you are shepherding young people into classroom exercises, helping them understand and see people who look like them is so important in the fight for them to build capacity around their potential. Imperative 6 is that we must address push out and exclusion in virtual schools and classrooms, and schools and classrooms in general. If you look here at these data show you on the left-hand side the proportion of students who are enrolled in schools. On the right-hand side, I show you the percentage of these students who, the percentage of these students who experience inside of school suspension. So if you look, Black students represent about 16% of the general population, but they represent 32% of those who experience inside of school suspension, right? You look at these data show you, again, Black students represent about 16% of the general population, but they represent about 40%. Y'all see that? Are y'all with me? 40% of students who experience outside of school suspension, 40%, right? And so what that means is 40% of the students are not in the classroom, right? More locally, if you look at these data, in Portland, we see a very similar trend, right? Where we see Black students represent about 9.1% of the general population. And I just arbitrarily pull some districts. Uh, but they represent 24% of those who experience inside of school suspension. If you look at these data, the rate is 29%. Right? And then some people have a nerve to ask me why I'm focusing on Black children. Let me be clear, I don't want any of our babies pushed out. I don't. I really don't. But when you look at these data, we realize, as has been stated earlier, we've got to centralize and hone in on what might be happening. Why is this continuing to happen in the experiences of our students? Expulsion rates, even more disturbing. In Beaverton School District, we see a similar trend with our Latinx students, right? Our Latinx community. So they represent about 24 or 20, almost 25%. But in terms of inside of school suspension, it's about 30%. Outside of school suspension, 35%. And expulsion, about 35%, almost 36%. And so the lenses that we come into this work to really understand and to build a capacity to support and build supports has to be centered on not only the importance of race, which is important, but also the importance of socioeconomic status, which is important. But we also have to understand the role racism plays in perpetuating these disturbing cycles. If you look here, not only should we be concerned about socioeconomic status, and we should be not only should we be concerned about race, but we've also got to understand that also, although Black students are 3 times more likely than white students, or Black boys are 3 times more likely than white boys to be suspended, don't miss this. Black girls are 6 times more likely than white girls to be suspended, right? And that tells us there's something about the way we see the Black girl body that has to be centered, that has to be problematized, and that has to be disrupted if we care about the fight for, and if we're committed to the fight for equity. What is it about the killing of George Floyd, which sparked an international protest, and just days prior, don't miss this, the killing of Breonna Taylor did not? What is it about the Black woman body that marginalizes and pushes and that intensifies levels of discrimination? So not only must we focus in and understand race, not only must we focus in and understand the centrality of poverty and socioeconomic status, but we also must join from the pivotal work of Kimberly Crenshaw, understand the intersections of those areas, and really embracing and building tools and mechanisms that say that we are committed to disrupting these patterns that perpetually push out, that perpetually marginalize particular bodies. Central themes here. One is that we know from educational psychologists that the more we push young people out, that we get to the fewer learning opportunities they have. They call that time on task, right? So if you were to ask me on a systemic level, Mr. Colt, Dr. Gill, if you were to ask me what is it that I would recommend on a systemic level, increase the number of instructional hours for young people. We do that, especially for those who are often pushed out, right? We start by really reimagining push out policies, right? Office referral policies. And for school leaders who are out there, you have to stand up. You have to say that we're going to co-create a space where this is not going to be an environment where you are going to be able to send students, push students out of the classroom because you're in a bad mood. Let me be clear here. School leaders have to step up and say, we are committed to, we are going to build a kind of environment such that every one of our babies, every one of our students is welcomed and feel a part of the very ethos of the place. We also know that punishment and discipline are not necessarily the same. I want to be clear. Don't leave this session saying Rich Milner said we shouldn't build discipline. Everybody on this call is disciplined. We're all disciplined. That's not the issue. Is how we punish and how we continue to punish and push out in ways that have actually done more harm than good. We also know from the research of Russ Skiba and others that Black and brown students are referred to the office for what's known as subjective infractions, and white students, our white babies, are referred to the office for what's known as objective infractions. We see this intensified as my research team and I have studied office referrals, that Black and brown students, especially Black girls, are pushed out for things like you're too loud or you're being disrespectful, right? White students are referred to the office for infractions like, I look at my digital clock, you know, you were supposed to be here at 9 o'clock, it's 9:03, right? That's an objective infraction. So what we see is, on a systemic level, what can we do, right? On a systemic level, it is helping to identify the nature of infraction and then disrupting and helping teachers understand how their own subjective way of being has impacted and contributed to the push out of bodies. And let me be clear here, the push out of bodies in schools, don't miss this, manifests, shows up, and is perpetuated in what is called a school to prison pipeline. I don't like the language school to prison pipeline either, but this is what we see time and time again, because those young people who get pushed out of schools, who get pushed out of classrooms first, then schools, are the young people who are funneled into the carceral system, which unfortunately, as I've shown you earlier, is oversaturated proportionally with folks of color, with folks of color and Black bodies in particular, Black bodies in particular. We also know that infractions tend to originate on the classroom level. And that's why I'm so hopeful and I'm so motivated by the fact that you're here on this call, because it means that you are committed to and that you want to develop tools and skill sets, right, to be able to disrupt what we're seeing, right, to disrupt what we're seeing. And most of the time, that office referrals show up for what's known as non-compliance, right? Non-compliance. I will share these slides with you: discipline versus punishment, discipline versus punishment. Now, I want to share a quick story with you about my daughters. I usually have a picture of them here, but because I know we're being streamed all over the place, I won't do that. But I do want to share a little bit about them. They're twins, and they look just alike, but they are very, very different. One of them, if I were to give them both a worksheet of 20 problems, 20 math problems, one of them is going to create and develop some additional problems. You know, she's going to add 6 problems. You know, she's going to say, "Look, Daddy, I added 6 problems." Right? She's a complier. She is learning how to do school, and she's a good student. The other one is going to do about 6 problems, and she's going to say, "Daddy, I figured it out. Number 5 is like number 7. Number 9 is like number 14. Number 2 is like number 8. Here you go," right? Until she gets to number 6, right? Until she gets to number 6. And let me just say that my wife and I have worked hard. We try our very best to get number 6 to engage, you know, and to do more. But that is, that's who 6 is becoming, right? And I'm so worried. Let me be clear. I'm so worried about 6 in school, right? Because what I've come to understand is 6 is not a complier. I was in New England. I think I was in Massachusetts, and I had like a short break, you know, between my sessions. So I pulled my laptop up and I checked email real fast, and there was a note from 6's teacher, and the teacher said that 6 was talking back, mouthing off, as the teacher was putting the students in kickball teams, right? So I shut my laptop. I finished my work, and I flew home, and I got home in time enough to be able to talk to 6 right before she was going to bed. So I went upstairs and I said, 6, we're not, I'm not going to have you being disrespectful to the teachers. I got this note, blah, blah. And 6 said, "Dad, there was no way we could win the game. She was putting all the best players on the other team." But here's the other point. She said, "And you told me if I found something to be unfair, that I should speak out about it." Wow. That was a powerful moment for me, a powerful moment for me. Because what I realized in that moment was that 6 wants to be educated, 26 is fine with being schooled. There's a difference, as Shuja and colleagues have made clear, between being educated and being schooled, right? And so from a social action perspective, remember we talked about the highest form of curriculum being social action. Are y'all with me? I think y'all are with me, right? Are y'all still there, right? Uh, so if you think about that from a social action perspective, what I'm coming to understand is 6, and what I'm trying to cultivate with 6 means that I have to help her understand that sometimes you do school in a way, right, that doesn't align with how we should be thinking about education and educating. I hope I'm talking to some people who are committed to educating and not necessarily schooling. I hope I'm talking to folks who are committed to that. And then a bonus imperative here as I conclude really is about a focus on psychological and mental health as curriculum, psychological and mental health as curriculum. By mental health, I mean that mental health is a state of being in which individuals realize his, her, their own capacities to cope with the normal stresses of life. This is taken here from the World Health Organization. And I just want to underline here and problematize how we think about normality, right? For some of you, so when you live in bodies that are pushed to the margins, right? Normality or normal stressors intensify, right? Colleagues, my white brothers and sisters, what I need you to do is to understand that your black and brown and indigenous communities often are experiencing deeper levels of stress due to discrimination, due to marginalization, and the like. My point here is it's tough, it's difficult, and I would argue impossible to deeply understand mental health if you don't understand race, right? I want to say to our colleagues who are straight, right, who classify as straight, right, that the stressors that your gay, your bisexual, your transgender community colleagues might be experiencing might be significantly inconsistent with the ways in which you're experiencing quote unquote normal stresses. So you can't understand issues of mental health if you don't understand how issues of homophobia manifest, right? And on and on and on and on. What I need you to do on an individual level, colleagues who have privilege, and we all operate from some form of privilege, inside and outside of privilege, is I need you to grab hold to whatever that privilege you have and use that privilege to dismantle those systems and to work to support those folks who are marginalized. So it's not this place of complicity, this place of where it's not me, so I don't have to worry about it or think about it. It is, I am consciously, aggressively working to dismantle those policies, those practices, those insights, those curriculum tools, those instructional practices, those assessment practices that work to dehumanize people, right? So your inability or your unwillingness to contribute means you're a contributor, I want to argue, to inequity. No more side sitting, no more being a spectator. We need you in the fight, aggressively, assertively in the fight to dismantle. And I know when I think about the teachers who work with my children, when I think about the teachers I've observed for so many years, the teachers with whom I've worked with, the teachers with whom I taught with, I feel confident that we have the heart for the work. Now we have to combine that heart with the skill and the mindset, right, to be able to do transformative work. You look at these data, what these data show is about 1 in 5 children experiences some form of mental health, this quote unquote disorder. And that, don't miss this, that about 70% of youth who are in the juvenile system, notice I didn't say juvenile justice system, suffers from a mental health challenge, And then look at these data, even more alarming, that 1 in 4 of all fatal police shootings is a result of someone with a severe mental illness. 1 in 4, right? 1 in 5 of all those who are in jail or prisons has a mental health challenge or mental health illness. And that 1 in 10 of all law enforcement responses is a result of someone with a severe mental illness. What does that say to me, David? What it says to me is we don't need more prisons. We don't need more juvenile facilities. What we need is more counseling and psychological spaces so that young people and so that people who are pushed to the margins and continue to be pushed to the margins, right, are able to work through and build the capacity to be able to address, disrupt, and challenge and change their own situations, but also that of their families. And we have the capacity to do it. The question is, do we have the will to do it? Are we willing to do it? Are we willing to confront and move forward? And what that also means for us colleagues, right, is that we have to build the capacity. We have to build the capacity to be able to respond to and to recognize when our young people are grappling with a mental health challenge. And that means in teacher ed, to my colleagues in teacher ed, we have to continue focusing on the content that that students are learning. We have to continue thinking about that our teachers learning, the teacher learning. We have to think about pedagogical skills, right? But we also have to help our teachers build the tools and the capacity to be able to support mental health challenges. That means that we can't see the work of mental health as external to the classroom. The school counselors, when you think about the moment we're in, think about people who've lost everything they have, right? People who've lost family members, people who've lost their jobs. What that tells us is, right, they've lost their physical possessions, is that we're in a place where we can't only go back to business as usual. We have to now build the repertoire and the tools to be able to get at trauma, to be able to respond to mental health challenges and the like, right? And I know, I feel confident that you're committed as am I. Do I have 3 minutes, David? I can't hear you. You're muted, David. I can't hear you, David.
Sorry, we're actually into our breakout time now, so we really
Okay.
need to wrap up quickly. I hate to do that.
Okay, all right, I'll do it. Okay, no problem. All right, I figured I was going off on a tangent a bit. I apologize for that. So I was going to share one more story, but I'm not going to share that story with you. But I want to just conclude by saying that some students, y'all, are going to succeed in spite of you, and some students are going to succeed because of you, right? I hope I'm talking to some folks. I hope I'm talking to some educators who are committed and who are going to go and do the work in a way that allows us to reimagine the work we do in transformative ways. Just for 1 second. Let's go. Let's do it. We got it. We've got this. We got this. We got this. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I look forward to engaging with you later. Thank you.